Okay, friends, I have some big news for you today. After years of dreaming about it and saying, how great would it be to have our very own Brilliant Balance boutique, we did it. And the online doors are open now. If you love the podcast and you want to start your day with a Brilliant Balance mug, or add a little inspo to your office art, or cozy up in a super soft hoodie with a hat for those late to the bus stop mornings, head over to brilliant-balance.com/shop and pick something that will remind you that you are brilliant, because you are. And then I want to see all the pictures of you with your new goodies. So tag me on social media at brilliant_balance when it arrives. It's brilliant-balance.com/shop. Go have some fun. I'm Sherilyn Skolnicki, and this is Brilliant Balance, the show for working women who are ready to shine. Each week, I bring you ideas, inspiration, and insight on balance, business, and getting it all done gracefully. You ready? Let's be brilliant. This is episode 260 of the Brilliant Balance podcast. But more importantly, it is our 5-year anniversary. So happy anniversary to the Brilliant Balance Show. And thank you for being here for this celebration episode. I have to tell you, if you knew me in real life, you would know that I am not particularly good at taking a minute to celebrate a milestone like this. I kind of tend to blow past them and just move on to the next thing. And so I want to thank my team, because they have been really good at reminding me that this is one we probably should take a minute to celebrate and honor and reflect, look back on the many, many episodes of the podcast that have happened over the last 5 years. So in a little bit, I'm bringing my team on today, and each one of them is going to share with you their favorite episode from over the years, and we'll have a little chat about that. And they asked me if I was going to share mine. And I said, this is like asking me to pick my favorite child. The truth is it changes every day. And what I really love at this point is that the podcast starts to really represent like a body of work for me. 260 episodes in, I've said a lot of things that I believe and been able to have a lot of great conversations with guests. And I treasure the fact that that is out there as a record of my values, my beliefs, the things that I've learned that I have been able to share. And I wanted to just reflect a little bit on how this whole thing started and then how it's evolved. And then we'll get into sharing their favorite episodes. So when I think about the era of Brilliant Balance, when we were deciding, do we or don't we want to start a podcast? Like, what would it mean? Podcasts were definitely already a thing, right? They were a little bit late to the party, but they've really blown up over the last 5 years. So I think our moment in history, it really wasn't like an obvious answer to do it. What I knew was that as compared to writing, right? Sitting down and writing like a well-structured blog post, podcasting for me was actually easier, right? The spoken word is kind of my jam. This is a form of media that was really well suited to kind of my natural capabilities and what I like, right? I enjoy conversations, and it's not usually super hard for me to like find the word I'm looking for. So the podcast format felt like a really good place. And at the time, there was a kind of collection of teaching that I really wanted to put out in the world. So I had a colleague in a group of entrepreneurs that I was in who was a podcast producer. And his recommendation to me was that we do 12 episodes. Just do 12 and see what happens. Maybe you'll love it, maybe you'll hate it, maybe it'll be somewhere in between, but why don't you commit to doing 12 episodes? And the other thing he made me do, I think it was 100, was write down 100 different episode angles or titles. And the idea was, if you can't think of 100 different kind of angles or titles that would connect to your subject matter, you maybe haven't found the right subject matter yet. Like this has to be something that you're willing to talk about on the regular. And so after doing those two exercises, coming up with 100-ish ideas and also getting 12 episodes recorded, I was pretty hooked. I was like, I think this is a format I can keep going with. And you might not know this if you're newer here, but for all of year one, every episode was a solo episode. We didn't introduce guests until somewhere into year two. And there's like this full circle moment happening because the first guest who I had on the podcast is going to be a guest speaker at my in-person event this fall. It's just really fun to think that we sort of started with guesting with her on the podcast, and now she's going to be appearing in person at an event with us, actually the week that this episode will go live. So I love those kind of moments that the show has brought. A few reflections when I think about all the different episodes. I love that now when I'm coaching, I can go back and reference a particular episode to help somebody go a little deeper into a subject. So I can be with them in a coaching call and give them a little bit of the concept and then say, there's actually a whole episode on this. Go listen to this one. And you're going to get, 30 minutes or so of teaching on this same subject, like why it's important for you to get comfortable being uncomfortable, right? Or what I hear you saying here, you might want to go listen to this episode on progress is not linear and anchor into that. And so I can sort of use the podcast now as a reference guide and hand out episodes to people to do that. And I say this in the conversation with the team, but we also made that a little bit easier for you. There is like a widget on our podcast page of the website where you can type in a word that you want some coaching on and get a podcast prescription that is connected to that subject matter. So if you haven't checked that out, I'll repeat it again in a little bit, but I think that's something that is helpful when you're starting to navigate, hundreds and hundreds of episodes. None of the podcast providers are particularly good at helping you search. And so it's a little bit easier, I think, to do on our site. The other thing I get asked sometimes is, how do I think about guests? How do I find guests? How do guests find us? And when I looked back at all of the guests who we've had on the show over the last 4 of the last 5 years when we've been having guests, it's really a beautiful combination of us reaching out to people that we're interested in interviewing and having on the show, and also of people reaching out to us and saying, hey, I would love to be on your show. And this is kind of my subject matter expertise. And here's the conversation I'd love to have if you're open to it. And that is a really wonderful thing about the podcasting community, is that there is this sort of never-ending wellspring of really talented people who have great stories to tell that are willing to come and tell them on the show. So I'm so grateful for the guests. We have some great guests coming up this fall. That's definitely a part of the format that I've come to love and I'm really excited about continuing. So the hardest part about podcasting for me is always the one-sidedness of the conversation. It's still a little weird to sit down and talk to myself while I'm recording. And so believe it or not, what I'm usually doing is picturing one human being, one person out there who I'm having this conversation with, and imagining what might I say to them, what might they need to hear, what might they be going through. And sometimes I'm talking to myself. Sometimes there is a coaching myself through something that I need to hear, and using the podcast as the reinforcement of that for myself. And it's sometimes spooky how often that is the case, that, the episodes really are delivering back to me exactly the lesson that I need to hear. We are most definitely all in this journey together. And I do not take lightly the responsibility of being a piece of the wisdom that you are allowing into your life. I'm so grateful for each and every person who presses play on an episode and listens on your way to work, while you're out for a walk, while you're doing the dishes, while you're winding down for the day. It really is a privilege that I don't take lightly, that you allow me into your, influence, that you allow my words to, in some small way, influence or shape your choices and your behavior. And if you are someone who has taken the time to tell me about that and the impact that it's had through a review of the show or a wonderful email or a DM, just know that I am so grateful for every one of those, because that's what turns it back into a two-way dialogue, getting to hear, how did it land? And what did you do with what you learned? What difference did it make in your life is just so gratifying to hear whenever you take a moment to share that. So thank you for doing that so faithfully and willingly over the years. I'm going to now get into this conversation with my team, and I want you to get to meet these awesome women who work with me every day behind the scenes at Brilliant Balance and hear their favorite episodes and reflections on the 5-year journey that we have been on. All right, crew, here we go. Thanks for going on this ride with me. I know I was just saying to them before we hit record that I think this will be really fun for the listeners to hear a little bit of our team dynamic. What do you guys think?
Yes. Absolutely.
Right? Sure. They're going to hear your voices for the first time ever on out in the real world. So it's been fun as we've been approaching the 5-year anniversary of the podcast, and we've had some fun conversations inside the team, and that actually birthed the idea for this episode of why don't we just bring you on and let you tell them yourselves what some of your favorite moments or episodes were over the years. So we're just going to do this a little bit round robin, and I want to hear it like in your words. What were your faves? Who wants to go first?
I will go first.
Awesome. This is Holly. So let's do it.
All right. So my favorite, I have several favorites, but one that really sticks out to me as an early one: beware the seductive power of being picked. And as you know, some of these podcasts precede me being here. And when I listened to this back in 2018, and to recap, if for those who haven't heard this one, it basically talks about the powerful force that is being picked or chosen by someone else. And the metaphor or the example that Sherilyn uses being at recess, standing in line to be picked for kickball. I think we can all relate to that so much, like that memory, childhood memory of your name being called. Yeah,
or not being picked for kickball, right?
Or probably in my athletic case, not being picked for kickball. And how that stays with us as adults. And, for me, particularly on the professional front, I was in a job where I was experiencing some burnout and I didn't really understand why. And then I heard this episode and I had never really been familiar with this concept. And I was like, oh my gosh, this is it. It's because I'm just going wherever I'm chosen to go because of this feeling. And I hadn't really considered that before, but it made a lot of sense because, we talk a lot about the Enneagrams within our team, and being an Enneagram 2, I think that is one of the most powerful feelings, is being seen by someone else for something that you do.
Yes.
And I was like, this is the problem, So when the podcast episode, goes through these questions you should ask yourself to kind of validate if this is, if you're just happy to be picked or if this is really something you want to do. And once I was able to kind of separate that moment from a more long-term decision, it was really powerful. And I think, that's actually what led me here, right?
Yes. Then you picked us.
I picked you. Yes.
Yeah. And you really did. Right. When I think about that, how that went down, it was like you literally flipped the whole model and reached out and said, I would really love to work for this organization. Like, what are the opportunities? And it was early days of like us really growing the team. So you flipped the whole script.
Yes.
Yeah.
Very vulnerable.
Yeah, but it worked. I think that notion, I'm watching your head nods and half you're on mute, but like that power of being picked is one that comes up a lot, I think, with our clients as well. And I know some of you on the call with me here have shared like same episode, same idea. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Cool. Do you ever find yourself saying, I just need a minute to breathe? While the whole idea of meditation can sound totally intimidating, I've found that stepping away from the chaos of life, even just for a few minutes, is incredibly restorative. So if you're short on time, but could use a few moments of peace right about now, listen to my 5-minute meditation for working moms. It'll help you clear your head and come back to your day feeling centered and refreshed. Head over to brilliant-balance.com/breathe. Press play and settle in for a few mini moments of peace right now. wants to go next?
I can go.
All right. This is Leslie.
Yes. So my favorite episode, this one had a huge impact on me. This one taught me a lot. And the episode was low power language.
Mm-hmm.
So for me, in the beginning of it, I like the simpleness of it, of cutting out from my everyday language the word just, the word actually, and almost. So I catch myself all the time when I want to say those things because I am diminishing what I'm trying to say, and also like showing up in the world a little less confident. So cutting out those words has been huge. Another thing I learned was just stop apologizing for myself of like, hey, I hate to bother you, but, and just coming out just with statements of this is what I want and this is what I'm asking for. And just similar to what I said before, showing up in the world less apologetic and just more confident. And instead of being coy about asking for permission, instead of saying like, can I have your permission or can I ask you a question? Just blurt out the statement of I have a question and raise my hand. I don't feel like I have a problem with that. Like
you don't.
Serious.
Yeah, no, you don't.
But in the sense of like, just depending on what atmosphere I'm in, to be less, just show up more unapologetic and learn to ask for what I want. And people really appreciate that.
And you are on a lot of the coaching calls with me. And this one blew up in the coaching call after it released because I think it came out of a coaching call where I was coaching somebody in real time on, and I was like, the thing I keep hearing is your language is diminishing your point. It's not what you're asking, it's the way you're positioning it or asking it. And it's just sounding like you're terrified. And so if we could get that language in a way that has more oomph behind it, it might actually change the outcome without you needing to do anything else. And that was a powerful idea. It birthed this whole low power versus high power language concept. But I think a lot of us caught ourselves, especially in emails, looking at how many qualifiers and diminishers we're putting in those emails before we even send them. It's amazing, really. You guys relate to this?
I do. And I would just add that I've used this episode a lot with my kids, and all kind of in the middle to older end of their teenage years. And so they do send a lot of emails to teachers and coaches and bosses. And I have one in particular asks me to like review every single email that goes out.
Yes.
And I'm constantly trying to remind, just don't apologize. You're not bothering them. Just say whatever it is or ask whatever it is you have to do. So it's been good from the parental standpoint as well.
I think that's huge. And it is amazing if you don't have teenagers yet and you're listening, how that's a whole skill they have to learn, is how to communicate sort of as quasi adults, right? With other adults, and learning like, what is the level of formality? What is how much, there's a little sweet spot of a little bit of introduction before they jump right into their ask. And I think it's great that we can pay that forward to our kids. Love it. Hillary, do you want to go next?
Yeah, but just one more thought on that with Leslie's episode is I think it just helps to instill in them a level of confidence.
Yes.
That, that may or may not come naturally to some kids.
Beautiful.
So my favorite episode is one of the very, very early ones. If I'm not mistaken, it's episode number 7. And it's kind of a simple concept, but the name of the episode is What Gets Scheduled Gets Done. And that has become a catchphrase in the Brilliant Balance community. But I just love the concept of it. I think there are so many of us that benefit from that practice of scheduling, even just the simplest thing of, go to Kroger today or to an email today. Things that you can easily put on the back burner. It helps the calendar run so much more smoothly. That's another thing I'm trying to teach my kids too. I'm trying to teach my kids everything.
Pay it all forward.
But yeah, I really like that one. I think it helps so many people. And I have a bunch of favorite episodes, but I also have a soft spot just because it was one of the very early episodes. And I remember when the podcast was just an idea and not an actual thing yet. So not to the original episodes.
The OG series.
The OG 10.
if you are newer to the podcast and you discovered it, let's say in the last, anywhere other than year 1, since we're at year 5, those first 12 episodes almost operate as a standalone unit. So Hillary's referencing, you said 7. If you go all the way back to the beginning and find episode 1, those first 12 are, I think at the time I was telling myself, I don't know if this thing's going to stick or not. We'll just see. Let's do 12 and see what happens. And that the guidance I got was release 12, where it could be a standalone sort of mini series. And if you never did another one, you would have a lot of your core principles out. So I think some of our really core initial thoughts are in those first 12, and that might be a fun trip down memory lane for people who are newer. You'll also hear how much better we've gotten at this over the last 5 years. I think I sound very formal in the first 5 episodes because it takes a while to get comfortable knowing you're just going to talk for 20 minutes and it's going to be out there forever. That took a hot minute to get used to, as you were all bravely learning here with me today. Okay, so what gets scheduled gets done. That concept of integrating your to-do list into a calendar just exponentially increases. And I bet I say that 10 times a week to somebody in my life, either my family or someone in the coaching community. Love it. Haley, let's look at you.
Okay. So the episode that I chose is protecting time for self-care during the holidays. So I am a big holiday gal. I'm a big fan of holidays. I'm sitting here in a spooky season shirt. And especially as we come up on this time of the year. So we have, Halloween, we have Thanksgiving, we have Christmas. But as we grow up, we tend to always be rushing around and we get buried under a mountain of work and responsibilities and obligations. And we try to make the holidays so special for everyone else as we kind of end up standing on the sidelines and taking it all on our shoulders. And so this episode, to me, did such a great job of providing ideas and tips to be fully present in these experiences as we go throughout the holidays. And it helped me kind of learn ways to get back into the mix with my family and friends and kind of basically just how to bring the joy back into the holidays. And I found it so relevant too, because one of the highlights in it is you talk about making sure you get in pictures with your family. And that's like such a thing in my
Which
family.
I hate doing, right?
My mom's always saying, make sure you're in the pictures too. Make sure you're in the pictures. So it's so relevant. And it's not only just for holidays too. Like I recently, I'm a new homeowner and, I'm doing a lot of hosting now. And this episode, I went back and re-listened to it maybe a month ago, just because I'm like, now that I'm doing a lot of the hosting, I do kind of find that I'm tending to run around and making sure everyone else is happy and putting a lot of the burden on my shoulders. And then everybody leaves and I'm kind of like, wait, who did I talk to? What did I do? And so this just really helped me kind of all around. And I think it's a really great episode to go back and listen to as we kind of start to phase into fall and then phase into winter. And I think it could be really helpful for a lot of people. So definitely one of my favorite episodes and kind of helps you remain a child at heart.
Yes. Haley, this is different than Self on the Shelf, right? That doesn't come up in the same episode.
So yeah, this is an encore episode.
Encore of that. Yes.
Mm-hmm.
So that same, if you have not heard this one and you're listening today, we'll link all of these in the show notes. But the concept of how we put ourselves on the sidelines, like with the Elf on the Shelf, right? And not getting into the game. This was another one that I heard about. I hear it about every year when we kind of re-air some part of it, that we're really bad at this. And I remember one woman in coaching telling me that she got out and made snow angels with her kids and was like, but I was on the ground making, which is like, we let them have that experience and we take the picture, but we're not necessarily reliving the experience. And you are so good at jumping into the experience with both feet. So I love that this was your favorite episode.
Of course. And I had sent it to so many people. I just think as we grow up, you kind of, a little bit of the magic starts to slip away if you don't allow yourself to really stay present and be present and bring the joy back. So I love this episode. I listened to it multiple times.
So awesome. Kathy, what about you? What's your favorite?
So it's hard to pick, but I think if I had to pick my favorite episode, it's The Mental Load of Motherhood. That one really resonates with me when I think back on when I was raising my kids. I always felt like I was doing so much more, but I knew my husband was doing a lot too, but I couldn't figure out why it felt more. And it was that mental load that I just couldn't fully realize and understand and articulate. And this is an episode too that I recommend to so many of our clients.
Right.
When they start to talk about like, there's an inequity in the household between the two parents, or a mother feeling exhausted and she's not sure why, but she'll say, but my husband really does help out. And then I kind of say, oh, it's probably the mental load that you're not taking into account. And I always send people to that episode. And I always say it's a great episode. It helps you think about this, but you also need to be prepared to let go of some things if
right.
you about that mental load. So be ready for that part.
Right.
It comes at the end of the episode. And I also love that it applies to kind of everything in life. Whenever you feel like there's an inequity in what you're doing versus somebody else is doing, it's stepping back and thinking about that mental load. Like, am I not taking that into account? And if so, what is that? And how do we balance it out?
Yes, I love that. And I loved this episode. I think because we have coached so many clients, you and I together through, that second job that's running in the background all the time. Even if you're not tactically executing something, it's taking up space. And over time, that's heavy, right? It's a heavy burden. Even though we do it lovingly, it's still like, it's a lot. And it feels like an all or nothing. How can I let go of this? It would take so long to provide directions or educate someone else about how to help. And I think there are ways through that we get into in that episode, and a little bit of the resistance too, of how do we get in our own way? Mm-hmm. Awesome. Well, you're such a good model for it, because I think our clients really benefit from hearing like that practical intersection of here's an idea, but now in your exact circumstances, how are we really going to engineer this so that it works, right? And that's the fun we get to have inside the coaching world.
Absolutely.
Okay. So awesome, you guys. I loved hearing all of these. Like, I love the differences, and like, because I know all of you, it's really fun to hear which I made you pick one. I know we all said we could pick more than one. We are going to have all of these linked in the show notes. So if you are, again, newer, or these are episodes you haven't heard about, we're going to make it really easy for you to find. And it struck me while we were talking that this is why we came up with this concept of a podcast prescription. So on our website, if you go to brilliant-balance.com/podcast, there is a little widget on that page where you can type in a keyword, a problem you're having, a challenge you're facing, like just get us in the pocket, and we will spit out a podcast prescription, or maybe more than one, that are relevant and connected to that particular issue that you might be grappling with. So let's say it's time management or calendar or parenting or whatever. If you just get us in the pocket with a keyword, we're really trying to help you navigate so I know some of the podcast streaming services just are difficult to go find older episodes. And when we're dealing with hundreds of them, again, even for the ones I listen to, that's frustrating to me. So we tried to take it on our website and make it simpler so that you could really go find things in the archives that might be relevant to you. Did any of you have any other comments you didn't get to make that you wanted to make today about the show?
Congratulations.
Oh,
this is huge. This is awesome.
Who would have ever thought 5 years later we'd still be going strong?
I thought.
It's so fun. It takes a village, y'all. So as you're listening and you think about like, oh, I listened to this show and it's Cheryl Ann, like this is the team behind me. We also have the podcast production team who's not on here today. And, we could not do this the way we do it without a really stellar production team. So we hand off audio to them and it comes back sort of fully produced and packaged. And that is such a blessing that keeps us in our core work while they help us through theirs. So awesome. Thanks, you guys, for sharing your favorite thoughts with me today.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right. Thank you for tuning in today, pressing play on this episode and listening to our staff picks of favorite episodes. Also, thank you for being a listener of the Brilliant Balance podcast. It is just a delight to put this out into the world for you every single week. And I am excited to head into year 6 with you by our sides. That's all for today, my friends. Till next time, let's be brilliant.
This is the podcastfactory.com.